Okay, hello everyone. Let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm extremely grateful to all of you for your extraordinary support of PanCAN and really excited to share with you today how you are changing the future for pancreatic cancer. You know more than anyone that pancreatic cancer has not stopped during the pandemic. People are still being diagnosed with this disease every day, and many people were fighting this disease when the pandemic started. So thank you for your continued belief in us. We are so grateful for your continued passionate commitment to PanCAN. You make all of our work possible. So today, we're really going to focus on giving you a recap of our recent PanCAN Scientific Summit that was held last month. You're going to hear about some of the recent developments in the pancreatic cancer field and some of the important research work that you are funding. So again, excited to share this update with you today. For those of you who I've not had the opportunity to meet, my name is Julie Fleshman. I'm the president and CEO of the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, fondly known as PanCAN, and I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to be with you virtually today. So we're going to take a look today at some highlights from PanCAN's recent scientific summit. This is our annual gathering of bringing together the investigators that we fund, as well as many of our advisors that work with us throughout the year. We're also going to take an inside look at our research grants program. You're going to hear a terrific conversation from a PanCAN grantee and the donor who funded her. And then finally, we're going to talk about PanCAN's Community for Progress, which is strengthening the research field, getting us to answers more rapidly by working collaboratively together. You are invited to this webinar because you're an important PanCAN donor and advocate. All the topics and discoveries that you're going to hear about today are possible because of you. You invested in these projects that are changing the world of pancreatic cancer and, most importantly, changing outcomes for pancreatic cancer patients. So again, we're just extremely grateful for your support, and I want you to make sure you understand by the end of this webinar the impact that your dollars are having on pancreatic cancer patients. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping. I'm sure you'll have some great questions throughout the presentation, and our plan is to get to all of the questions at the end of the presentation. So to submit a question, just go look for the icon at the bottom of your screen that has the 3 dots on it. Click on that, and then click on Q&A. And then you can just type your question into the screen and send it to our panelists. If you're on the phone only and you cannot see our screen, don't worry. Our speakers will describe the material that they're discussing so that you can still learn and enjoy this webinar. Our Q&A session will take place at the end of the presentation, but please feel free as you have questions to go ahead and submit them, and then we'll be ready to go at the end for Q&A. If you have any issues or need assistance, please email Alyssa Miranda. Her email address is on the screen, amiranda@pancan.org. All right, so I am really excited to share the impact that you're all having. Again, none of this that we're going to talk about today would be possible without you. So as you know, pancreatic cancer is an extremely challenging disease, and PanCAN's approach to fighting this challenging disease is really a comprehensive approach. We invest in research and clinical initiatives, and that's really where we're going to focus the webinar today, is talking about the things that PanCAN is investing in on the research side of things. That is our biggest investment across all of these areas. But PanCAN also plays an important role in government advocacy. Through our advocacy efforts, we're able to increase the federal resources that are available to pancreatic cancer researchers. You may have read recently that we were able to create a brand new pancreatic cancer research program at the Department of Defense. And so that's a great example of how advocacy is increasing the federal research dollars that are available to our pancreatic cancer research community. Another really important hallmark of what PanCAN does is our patient services. We have an amazing group of individuals who man a call center where patients and families can call in and get comprehensive information about the disease. It's a case management system so that if someone calls in and talks to one of our case managers, the next time they call in, they'll be reconnected to that same person and continue that conversation so they can be together through that patient's entire journey. And we have comprehensive information about pancreatic cancer, really an important part. And I think one of the areas that people know that we do patient services, I'm not sure people are always as aware that we make a tremendous investment in research. And then finally, our community engagement, that is our 60 volunteer affiliates, our network of volunteers around the country that are helping us to raise funds, raise awareness and visibility, reach out to their members of Congress, reach out to patients that are newly diagnosed, and really help us spread our mission and build our movement. So you may not know that last year you invested $21 million in research at PanCAN. So we really do have a large research portfolio, and those research dollars go across all the things that you can see on your screen. They are invested in our competitive grants program. That's when researchers apply for a grant, and that grant is competitively reviewed, and where we fund the very best scientific projects that are presented to us. We also have our Know Your Tumor service, which is a personalized medicine service. It's available through our patient services program, but a way that we are learning about how personalized medicine can be used to advance care for pancreatic cancer patients. We have a patient registry where patients can go in and enter information about their journey, and that collective information, that aggregate information, can be then used to look and better understand how to improve care for patients. We also are in the process of building a new, we're calling it Spark. It's a data platform that will bring a lot of this information together, this data together of all the research initiatives that PanCAN is investing in, and then make this information available to the research community to accelerate progress. And then our two really large initiatives, we're focusing really on both ends of the spectrum. We all know that we need an early detection test for pancreatic cancer so that we can diagnose the disease earlier, but we also need better treatment options. And so the early detection initiative is focused on, as it says, discovering and creating an early detection strategy for pancreatic cancer. And then Precision Promise is focused on treatments. It's a clinical trial that PanCAN will be sponsoring to test multiple treatment options simultaneously in a more rapid fashion. So we're really excited about all of these initiatives, and you'll hear a little bit more about them throughout this presentation. So cumulatively to date, you've invested $126 million in top-notch research. That includes 199 research grants to 187 scientists at 71 institutions around the country. So really, PanCAN is playing an extremely important role in funding pancreatic cancer research all across the country. And I think the fact that 71 institutions have received a grant from PanCAN really shows the growth in the field, that there are this many institutions that have pancreatic cancer research programs today. And again, as a donor and a constituent and an advocate of PanCAN, you should feel proud that you've played an important role in really growing the pancreatic cancer field. So what is PanCAN's Community for Progress? I've alluded to it a couple of times. So this is really something that PanCAN has been working to build for the last 20 years. It is bringing together the researchers, the grantees that we fund, our advisors, and ensuring that there's opportunities for sharing ideas, for collaborating, for learning from each other, and making sure that the researchers are not alone, that they're not just at their institution, you know, working on this challenging disease, but that they have this network of researchers and clinicians across the country that are all working together collaboratively to make impact on pancreatic cancer. And you're going to hear a little bit more about PanCAN's Communities for Progress throughout this presentation. But here you can see a couple of pictures of this in action. So part of it is serious and learning and sharing, and then also really providing energy and spirit to the research community and thanking them for what they do for our patient community. And so you can see here some of our researchers at a scientific summit back when we could be together in person, and some of them at our volunteer summit when they were our champions, and so they all came in wearing capes. And so again, just a way to energize and inspire both the research community and our volunteers and supporters and donors that we are making progress and we're all in this together. So now PanCAN's fiscal year started on July 1st, and regardless of a pandemic, we won't stop now. We've got a lot going on and a lot of work to do. And so this year, and you continue to allow us to be bold through your support. Being bold is one of PanCAN's, attributes that makes us successful and has allowed us to really push through and accelerate progress for patients. So I'm really thrilled to tell you that, as I already reported, you invested more than $21 million in research last year. And despite the challenges in fundraising due to the pandemic that PanCAN is facing, just like every other organization really around the world is facing, we are still increasing our investment in research, and this next year we'll be investing $23 million in research. So we've really prioritized what is most important and most impactful to reaching and achieving our ambitious goals. And all of this is working. The 5-year survival rate for pancreatic cancer does continue to increase. So we were thrilled this year when the 5-year survival rate increased to 10%, so double digits for the very first time. And we really saw it go from 6% to 10% over the last 5 to 6 years. So 10% is still unacceptable, but it's absolutely moving in the right direction. And again, that is great thanks to all of you. And finally, I just always want to highlight for our donors that you are investing your philanthropic dollars wisely. Charity Navigator, as many of you know, is sort of a watchdog group for nonprofit organizations. A 4-star rating is their top rating of a nonprofit organization. And PanCAN, for the 16th year in a row, received a 4-star rating recently. And I think a pretty amazing statistic, out of 9,000 organizations that they rate every year, only 21 of them, PanCAN being one of them, has received a 4-star rating for 16 years in a row. And this just means they're looking at our PanCAN's financial health. They're looking at our accountability. Are we doing what we say we're going to do with those dollars? And our transparency. Are we transparent with our donors and our supporters in telling you what we're doing and why we're doing it? So without further ado, let's move on to getting a recap of our scientific summit. I'm so pleased to introduce the Director of Surgical Oncology for the Moores Cancer Center at the University of California, San Diego, and the Chair of PanCAN's Scientific and Medical Advisory Board, Dr. Andrew Lowy. Dr. Lowy, over to you.
Thanks so much, Julie. It's really a pleasure to be with all of you today, obviously virtually, but we look forward to the next time we can all be together in person. And it's my pleasure to share with you the highlights from PanCAN's Scientific Summit. I've attended many scientific and medical conferences through the years, both in person and now, unfortunately, virtually. But there's always something very special about PanCAN's events. Obviously, the main focus is to just talk about science, and there's tremendous progress happening in the many labs and clinics across the country, really in large part due to your trust and support of PanCAN. But, these events also, as Julie has said, emphasize the value of community and our most important focus, which is really keeping the patient at the center of everything we do. As chair of PanCAN's Scientific and Medical Advisory Board, I'm proud to say it's really remarkable what PanCAN supporters have done for our research community. As Julie said, the organization continues to invest even more dollars in research despite the impact of the pandemic on fundraising. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. Okay. No, one before that. Great. So again, the emphasis on community really is a differentiator for PanCAN, and we've said it a number of times. We can't really stress it enough because we don't just award money to researchers and then let them go off and do their research. We welcome them into a warm and, as you saw, really fun community that interacts and that strives to foster mutual success. It's really unlike many other research communities. And people commented on it all the time. And this event really was an opportunity to welcome recipients of 10 new research grants into the community and give them the feel for our PanCAN family. Next slide. So we're going to hear more from Ingunn Stromnes later in the call. She spoke at the Scientific Summit. She gave a great talk and talked about the impact of early career funding on her research and on her professional success. In light of the importance of bringing new scientists in the field, and frankly, there are many unique struggles that junior scientists face, especially during this pandemic, you are really helping PanCAN invest in research grants that fund early career scientists through this year $200,000 career development awards. So we really, really thank you for that. Next slide. Dr. Kristen Bryant, another PanCAN Award recipient, unfortunately lost her father to pancreas cancer less than a year after he was diagnosed. And Kirsten was inspired to devote her career to continuing this fight by focusing her research on pancreas cancer. And she's been an incredible advocate in PanCAN's advocacy efforts. She's received a PanCAN grant, as I mentioned, that you guys funded, and she has now leveraged this into a very prestigious merit award from the National Cancer Institute. So it's really evidence of the value that these grants to junior scientists provide, because there's tremendous return on investment. And as part of the comprehensive approach that Julie mentioned, your advocacy efforts bring federal attention and more funding to pancreas cancer research. And the early career research funding awarded by PanCAN helps scientists get set up for success and sustainability for their programs so they can remain in the field and keep their career focused on pancreas cancer. This is another example of how you help grow the field, how you this accelerates progress and obviously leads to changing patient outcomes. Next slide. So we heard from Joni and Scott Krines, who are incredibly generous supporters of PanCAN since Joni's pancreatic cancer diagnosis in 2017. Joni talked about how she's a thriver, not a survivor, and that became a buzzword for the whole symposium. Scott mentioned really how PanCAN has been a huge catalyst in bringing the community to them. And most importantly, he really credits PanCAN with saving his wife's life. And they both expressed incredible, enormous, endless gratitude. Next slide. Joe Krebs is a survivor and a Purple Stride captain. He also talked about how he's a thriver with stage 4 pancreas cancer, reminded us about how scary it is and lonely it is to have this disease, but that with PanCAN, he never felt alone. And by joining this community, you're all working to fund research, find hope, detect the disease early, discover treatments, and eventually find a cure. And Joe had a really important piece of advice, which I think touched everybody who was listening, which was, even if you're diagnosed with pancreas cancer, and if you're not, don't forget to live and to do what you love and to savor every moment of life. Next slide. Another terrific and unique feature of the summit was incorporating feedback and questions from patient research advocates, reminding our grant recipients to always think about how their work can benefit patients and how patients and survivors play a role in moving their research forward. Tiona Ducre, seen on this slide, is a 4-year survivor of pancreas cancer. She was one of 5 research advocates who participated in the summit and they act as a critical bridge between patients and their research, bringing patients and researchers, I should say, bringing patient voices to the table and really providing us insights that we may not think about as we're focusing on our research. So this is really, really valuable and a unique part of our summit. Next slide. So as the slide says, you're helping us make progress in early detection. As Julie mentioned, PanCAN is aiming to improve patients' lives by working towards early detection and better treatments. I'm a surgeon, and I really can't even describe for you the feeling of when we successfully remove a pancreas cancer from a patient, knowing that we've offered them the best chance for cure. But unfortunately, that's not where the story, begins or ends. Many and nearly all patients with pancreas cancer also get systemic treatments like chemotherapy or targeted therapies. And really optimally, to fully solve the problem of pancreas cancer, we want to detect it earlier and earlier, because when we detect it, when it's very, very small, we actually can cure most patients. And so starting with early detection, I'm going to share some of the highlights of the work you're funding and the work PanCAN is doing to make progress in this area. Next slide. So this graphic is a reminder of why it's important to diagnose the disease earlier. Just as I mentioned, the 5-year survival when we detect this disease very early is incredibly good. But when we detect it late, obviously, we don't do nearly as well. We know that because this disease isn't common enough to make population-wide screening feasible or cost-effective, we need to identify populations at the highest risk of pancreas cancer, folks who can be screened to detect the disease when they're still eligible for curative surgery. Next slide. So one relatively newly discovered patient population who might be eligible for screening are those with a new diabetes diagnosis after age 50. As this figure shows, only 0.03% of the general population over 50 will be diagnosed with pancreas cancer within 3 years. But when you look at those with a recent diabetes diagnosis, that number triples to almost 1%. And through the work of Suresh Chari at MD Anderson and others, we can further enrich that population if we use a scoring system called NPAC, which takes into account also people's age, changes in their weight and their blood sugar, and brings the percent of people who may develop pancreas cancer closer to 4%. Next slide. So based on this evidence, and with your support, without which we could not do this, PanCAN has created an early detection initiative, which will gather over 12,000 individuals recently diagnosed with new onset diabetes or elevated blood sugar, as well as some other criteria. We'll be collecting blood samples for biomarker studies in the future, and a subset of these patients are going to undergo imaging tests to determine whether their pancreas cancer, should it develop, could be diagnosed in time to have curative surgery. This is a collaboration with the National Institute of Health, the American Diabetes Association, and scientists and clinicians at top institutions throughout the country. We've developed a protocol to conduct this study. And the study has undergone institutional review board review and is now close to approval to begin enrolling, which is incredibly exciting. Next slide. So another population that can be studied to improve early detection efforts is those with pancreatic cysts. Many don't know that almost 1 in 5 pancreas cancers can be traced to a cyst as its origin. And at the scientific summit, one of our keynote speakers was Dr. Atur Singhi from the University of Pittsburgh. Dr. Singhi is a pathologist and an expert in pancreatic cysts and their development into pancreatic tumors. Next slide. what we're trying to do really is find the proverbial needle in the haystack. And that's because cysts themselves are very common, but only a fraction of them will become cancer. And so what we're trying to do is find those cysts with a higher likelihood of progressing to cancer to be able to offer early intervention and allowing patients with low-risk cysts to avoid not only surgery, but to avoid even costly surveillance using X-rays. Next slide. Thanks to his PanCAN translational research grant that you funded, Dr. Singhi has developed a test called PancreaSeq that analyzes the genetic changes present within pancreatic cyst fluid. Once a cyst is detected by imaging, an endoscopic procedure called endoscopic ultrasound can be performed, in which time fluid is extracted from the cyst. Then we can sequence DNA, and an analysis can look at the probability that that cyst might progress to pancreas cancer. And the test is now being used at more than 20 institutions across the country and has been utilized for more than 1,000 patients. Next slide. Well, moving on to treatment. We know that the only way new pancreatic cancer treatments can be brought to patients is through research and clinical trials. We also know the clinical trials system historically has been too slow and new drug approvals are too rare. Because of that, you have funded scientific and clinical research to accelerate progress, including enabling PanCAN to sponsor really a groundbreaking clinical trial called Precision Promise. Next slide. One of the highlights of the scientific summit was a keynote presentation from Dr. David Linehan, a fellow surgeon scientist who's at the University of Rochester. Dr. Linehan received the single largest grant that PanCAN has ever awarded, $2 million in 2016. That was generously funded by the Henry and Marilyn Taub Foundation. Dr. Linehan's project tackles some of the biggest challenges in treating pancreas cancer: the dense stroma that surrounds the tumor, the lack of an immune response, and the difficulty understanding why some patients respond to treatments better than others. Next slide. So this slide, which is quite busy, but the point of it is really to show the complexity of the tumor cells that make up a pancreas cancer and the factors that surround and infiltrate the tumor. And Dr. Linehan really pointed out in his talk that the other cells in the pancreatic tumor actually outnumber the pancreatic cancer cells. And for most pancreas cancer patients, these other cells tend to tip the scale in favor of suppressing an effective immune response to cancer, blocking and hiding it, and not allowing our immune system to attack this cancer. His efforts really are striving to shift the balance to immune stimulation, to awaken the immune system, to recognize, attack cancer cells, to kill the tumor and diminish the stroma's ability to evade this immune reaction. Next slide. Because of the grant he received from PanCAN that you funded, Dr. Linehan is pursuing 5 novel clinical trials to study combinations of treatment to modify the stroma and activate patients' immune system. He's conducting robust analyses of patient tumor, their blood, bone marrow, and other specimens before, after, and while on treatment, and treatment to determine in real time whether the patient's tumor is responding. He's also developed a test in collaboration with colleagues at the University of North Carolina to try to understand before therapy which patients are more likely to respond to one of the most effective combination chemotherapy regimens, FOLFIRINOX, which unfortunately doesn't work for everybody. Studies like these really demonstrate the importance of PanCAN's focus on collaboration, multidisciplinary team science, which is of tremendous benefit to junior and senior investigators alike, and obviously ultimately to patients. Next slide. Well, as I mentioned, to bring new treatment options to patients faster, you have enabled PanCAN to launch Precision Promise. Precision Promise is one of the most exciting and promising initiatives PanCAN has ever taken on, and I would go so far as to say one of the most promising initiatives the pancreas cancer field has ever seen. And it couldn't have been done without you. And the slide just goes over some of the differentiators between this adaptive clinical trial design and the way traditionally clinical trials have been conducted. The bottom line is that this groundbreaking clinical trial is going to be less expensive. It's going to help develop new treatment options and get them to patients faster. Next slide. Following years of development and in collaboration with some of the most brilliant minds and change agents in our community, this trial has now launched. It is remarkable that even in the midst of the pandemic, we have forged ahead and been able to launch PanCAN's really boldest initiatives that have only been made possible by donors like all of you. Next slide. So Precision Promise is now open at 11 of 15 sites, including, I'm proud to say, our own site here at UC San Diego. And we just opened literally days ago and identified a prospective patient just yesterday who we're hoping will go on study. Without you, Precision Promise would not have reached this milestone. And we just have a few more sites left to open. The 15 sites that are participating are world-class centers that were selected through a competitive peer-reviewed process. We received over 50 applicants to be part of this, and we certainly hope that in the future we'll be able to expand. PanCAN's really uniquely positioned to tackle this challenge. We've proven we get things done that others think are impossible. This long-term initiative has one goal in mind, and that's to change outcomes for pancreatic cancer patients. We believe that the answers are in reach. There have never been more exciting drugs that have shown promise in pancreatic cancer, and many of which are going to be part of Precision Promise. And we want to test them and get them to patients faster. And with your support, we will get there. Next slide. So to sum up, I think you got a flavor that the science was amazing, that our advocates, thrivers, and survivors continue to inspire us. It's obvious how important working together is. We are a synergistic group. I really view it that way. It's clear that we make discoveries and accelerate progress when we work together effectively. And as Julie said earlier, pancreatic cancer, unfortunately, has not stopped or slowed down, but neither has PanCAN. We couldn't do any of this without you, so we thank you again for your commitment and your support. And it's now my pleasure to hand the presentation back to Julie to introduce the next set of panelists. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Lilly. That was a terrific recap and a terrific update. I just want to express my gratitude for all that you do as a pancreatic cancer surgeon and as an expert in this field for patients every single day. And we asked Dr. Lilly to do a lot of things for PanCAN, and he always says yes. So we're all just tremendously grateful to you for your commitment and support. So everyone, if you have questions about anything that Dr. Lilly just talked about, please feel free to go ahead and submit those, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the presentation. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our next two speakers for today. Dr. Nancy Stagliano is an accomplished serial biotechnology entrepreneur, past CEO and current executive chair of Neuron 23, which is a venture-backed company discovering and developing therapeutics for genetically driven neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's disease. In addition, Dr. Stagliano serves on numerous private and public company biotechnology boards. She also has a PhD in neuroscience. And I'm thrilled to announce that she recently joined PanCAN's board of directors just this past July. So we're thrilled to have Nancy join us here today. And Dr. Ingunn Stromnes, who's currently an assistant professor in the Department of Microbiology and Immunology at the University of Minnesota. Her current research interests focus on integrating basic cancer immunology research with clinical translation of new cellular immunotherapies for pancreatic cancer patient treatment. She's received 2 research grants from PanCAN. She initially received the PanCAN Career Development Award in memory of Skip Vera in 2017, and then received the PanCAN Catalyst Grant in memory of Julia Stagliano in 2019. So great to have both of you with us, and both of our guest speakers have given me permission to call them by their first name. So Nancy, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about what's your connection to pancreatic cancer, and how did you first get involved with PanCAN?
Thanks, Julie. It's such a pleasure to be here today, and thank you to everyone online for supporting PanCAN. Pancreatic cancer became a part of my family's vocabulary, unfortunately, in the late 90s. And on the next slide, you can see some photos of my family. My Uncle John, pictured in the upper left with his 3 sisters, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in the late 90s. And while he struggled with disease for about 9 months, he passed at the age of 77. And despite having that experience, in 2001, when my mom, pictured on the left in that photo and in the other photos, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, it was just a complete shock. And while you can mentally prepare yourself for these things, it certainly is different life when you lose your best friend to pancreatic cancer. So for me, it was a quick kind of decision to say, how can I get involved with an organization that tries to help families? How can I get involved with an organization that tries to change this condition in patients and their families? And so I quickly started participating in Purple Stride events. I started running half marathons in Miami to support PanCAN. It's the first time I met Julie. And I really got a great sense for the organization and its mission, and certainly connected with it on a personal level, but realized that it was much bigger than me, much bigger than my family, and really hoped that in some way or another over the years I could continue to support the organization and other people going through this terrible disease.
Great, thanks, Nancy, and thank you for sharing your story about your uncle and your mom. So last May, you generously funded a PanCAN Catalyst grant supporting the work of Dr. Stromnes at University of Minnesota, and it's named in honor of your mother, Julia. What made you decide to fund a PanCAN research grant?
I think the 8 weeks or so that my mom battled pancreatic cancer left me with each day almost this feeling of helplessness. There was nothing to do. And when you sit through that and you have that, and I know many people on the line have that experience, you want to prevent others from having that experience and situation and feeling. So luckily, I was in a position, having worked in drug discovery and in the biotech industry for a long time, to finally be able to contribute at a higher level to pancreatic cancer research. And as Dr. Lowy points out, and PanCAN is all about early detection, early treatment, I personally believe that early investment in this disease is what we have to do, and in researching this terrible, terrible disease, because the sooner we do that, the sooner we will have a cure. And it doesn't happen overnight. So for me, this notion of getting involved at this level, supporting someone like Ingunn, and getting research that was vetted by the scientific advisory board at PanCAN and really thoughtfully laid out, getting that funded and going as soon as possible was really my key driver.
That's terrific. Thank you. So Ingunn, it must have been pretty exciting when you learned that you were going to receive a $500,000 Catalyst grant from PanCAN, funded in memory of Nancy's mom, Julia. So can you tell us a little bit about why receiving a grant like this was so important to your career and research efforts?
Yes, absolutely. It's a tremendous honor to receive a Catalyst grant in memory of Julia Stagliano, Nancy's mom, and just to be a part of carrying on her legacy is also a huge responsibility. It's especially meaningful to receive this award from someone like Nancy because of her passion and strong background in scientific research, her ability that she's proven to develop these biotech companies and to commercialize new drugs for targeting human disease is just very inspiring to me. Nancy is definitely a role model for me in many ways, that she's just very determined to kind of make a difference. It is very difficult to convey what it takes to start a lab. You know, as a PhD in immunology, I've had many years of training as an undergrad, as a predoctoral fellow at NIH, as a graduate student, as a postdoctoral fellow. Like, there's just years and years of of training that I've been fortunate enough to receive. But when you actually take all that training and start a lab, it's just a huge leap. And it's kind of a leap of faith. And like, are you good enough? Are you going to have what it takes to do this? And to have the support from a PanCAN grant like this is just, it's hard to even convey how important it is for someone like me in my stage of this career, right? Because you have to essentially prove yourself over and over again in this job. And that having a grant from PanCAN is just a huge honor. And it kind of shows that your grant got rigorously reviewed by not only just scientific experts, but experts in pancreatic cancer. And so the people that are reviewing our grants, it's just very unique because all the reviewers are actually all have significant expertise in pancreatic cancer. And so to have my grant funded was just an incredible honor to say that, you know, the community actually is believing in what we're doing, and what we're doing could be important in the long term for changing how we treat this disease. You know, I'm someone, I think, like Nancy, I can relate to. I dream big. I want to do it all. I love challenges, but I know that also I can't do it alone. And so I'm incredibly appreciative of Nancy and PanCAN for, you know, bringing me into this community. So, yeah.
Great, thanks so much. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the research that you're working on?
Right, so I love to talk about research, so I'll try to keep this brief. I'm a T-cell immunologist by training, and so T-cells are the type of immune cell or white blood cell in your body that really does all the heavy lifting in cancer immunotherapy. And so when you think about vaccinations, like we're talking about generating a COVID vaccine right now, right? You're trying to target those cells in your body, the T-cells that can recognize either infected cells or tumor cells and kill them and get rid of them while sparing normal healthy tissue. So I kind of think of T cells, you have millions of them in your body, but the ones that actually can recognize pancreatic cancer and kill pancreatic cancer are extremely rare. Maybe 1 in 10,000, 1 in 500,000 cells, T cells, are the ones that can actually recognize pancreatic cancer. So my research is really trying to figure out a way that we can make those T cells in the lab and engineer them to make them specifically recognize and kill pancreatic cancer. And so based upon work that was also funded by PanCAN and in my career development award, we know that that's not enough. We can have lots of T cells in the body that even recognize pancreatic cancer. We get to that point, and they can actually infiltrate this disease. As Dr. Lowy, showed nicely, Dr. Linehan's work earlier about this complex tumor microenvironment that T cells have to work in, we have to do things in addition to make them function. And so what we've chosen to do is kind of based upon our data, suggesting that we can target a specific molecule that is overexpressed by a lot of those suppressive cells in the tumor microenvironment. So by targeting one pathway in T cells, we can make them more functional in the tumor microenvironment. So we do a lot in the lab. We have these incredible mouse models that we use to study how this happens, but ultimately a second aim of my grant is actually to develop these T cells using human cells and in humanized models. And so within a few years, hopefully we'll have a product that we can start testing in early phase clinical trials.
Great, so thanks so much. Oh, go ahead.
Just one more thing. I got inspired by doing this because I recognized kind of there's a knowledge gap in this area. And so I think we're one of the few labs that are actually studying the T cells that matter in this disease. And that's really exciting to be in that place, because I think then we can make a big difference.
Great. Well, thank you. The work is really exciting, and I think we all look forward to that day when we can implement this for patients and that there's immunotherapy options for patients. So thank you for the important work that you're doing to get us there. So Nancy, we've talked about that you happen to have a background in the pharmaceutical industry, and so you understand the importance of research and advancing patient outcomes. The Catalyst grant specifically that Ingunn received was targeted at a junior investigator. So why did you feel funding a junior investigator was important?
You know, I've been in the industry doing research for 25 years, and I can still remember the beginning of my career. I can still remember a time when it was very difficult to get funding. And while I had, I thought, some really important questions and was in an exciting center, and it still was incredibly difficult to get started, to get that body of data, to get those questions identified based on existing research and novel ideas. And so looking at what PanCAN had set up, the ability to work through a mechanism like the Catalyst Grant to get to someone like Ingunn, for me, felt like a perfect way to hopefully jumpstart and accelerate that important work you just heard about. What I aim to do, given my background in pharmaceuticals and biotech, is to continue to support work like Ingunn's doing, because I'm sure she's going to make good progress, and help translate that into things that we can take into patients, into new drugs and new therapies. And so it's been, for me, the ideal to marry my background in research and science and drug discovery with the kind of work that PanCAN helped me to find.
Great. Well, thank you, Nancy, and thank you for that understanding of the impact that funding junior investigators really does have on this field by growing the field and the number of researchers that are focused on the disease, but also funding these junior investigators that have really bright ideas and maybe new ways of thinking about the disease. So thank you. So Ingunn, at PanCAN, in addition to receiving the grant, you also get to be a part of our Community for Progress, which we've talked a little bit about here during this webinar. So you had the opportunity to meet and interact with many of our scientific and medical advisory board, other senior investigators, and our industry partners. So can you talk a little bit about how this has been helpful to you? Is there someone in particular that you were excited when you had the opportunity to meet them?
Yes, absolutely. I've met so many people, but I can single out a couple of people. First is Dr. Tony Hollingsworth, who is very senior in the field of pancreatic cancer research. He's been doing this for many years, and he approached me at a PanCAN meeting and saw one of the talks that I gave, and he's like, well, you're a T-cell immunologist and you're at the University of Minnesota and I'm in Nebraska and we have this great program and we want to do this work, but we don't really want to do the work you're doing, so would you like to work together? And I was just like completely honored, and absolutely, because someone that's just starting a lab, to have someone senior come up to you and just be so open and generous, collaborative, like there wasn't like a competition, or there wasn't anything like, you're trying to keep secrets or like try to do research in a bubble, right? Where you're just worried that you have this idea and you want to, keep it close because you're worried that someone else will take it from you, and kind of the stuff that goes on in science. It just completely doesn't happen in this PanCAN community, which is great. People are open, they're generous, they're transparent. And so I've been to University of Nebraska and I presented there, and now we have a collaboration going looking at T-cell populations in human pancreatic cancer, and it's really exciting. So that's, I think, the one example I have time to talk about today.
Yeah, that's terrific. We love those stories of how, not just the grant that you're receiving, but it really goes way, way beyond that. So it's terrific. So Nancy, I mentioned that you just joined PanCAN's National Board of Directors. Why did you decide to join the board, and what do you hope to accomplish in that role?
Thank you, Julie, for allowing me to join the board. I feel very privileged. I've been a CEO a few times, and I look at what it takes to run organizations. This is the first time I've been involved in a not-for-profit in this capacity on the board. And I was so impressed with you, with your colleagues, and with the way the organization is run. And so for me, it's prior to this experience, I didn't have the visibility as to what went on behind the scenes. And now, as I'd gotten to know you and your colleagues more and more, I've been so impressed by the thoughtfulness by which you approach this challenge, the sophistication of the organization, and I think the passion and commitment to this disease. And so when you roll all that up, this is absolutely a place where I want to spend my time and give anything that I can possibly give, because I believe that PanCAN is going to be one of the key organizations that makes the difference in this disease. Everything you've done, this integrated approach, is really the way it has to be tackled. And for me to just be able to contribute in a small way at this level is really something I'd always hoped to be able to do. So thank you for that opportunity.
Well, thank you for those lovely and kind comments, and I really look forward to working with you more closely in the coming years, so thank you. Ingunn, why is pancreatic cancer research, why pancreatic cancer research, and is there something that inspires you to continue to stay motivated in your work as a researcher?
Absolutely. During my postdoctoral training, for the end of it, I had a close family relative that died from cancer. She actually came out to Seattle and got engineered T-cell therapy, and it didn't work for her. And it was an extremely frustrating time in my life. But I also learned so much from her, and so grateful for her strength and her willingness to be part of a clinical trial to try to make a difference in any way she can. And I realized that life is short and you have to make a difference when you can, and you have to act now. And that's really motivated me to take a leap and move across the country and start my lab. I think overall too, I'm very motivated by challenges, and pancreatic cancer is probably one of the biggest challenges we have right now. It's just, it's exciting to me. Obviously, when you go into this field, as Nancy talked about, it's not the path of least resistance, but also that's what motivates me. This is a big challenge. I'm inspired by pancreatic cancer because I want to make a difference. And I think we're at a time in our lives now where we have the technology, we have the tools, we have new drugs coming up the pipeline. And so we're now at this precipice that we can tackle this big challenge in a really big way. And being part of the PanCAN community is going to really help me do that. I also recognize that as a T-cell immunologist, I really feel there's this big gap that I can help fill in the pancreatic cancer research field. So.
Great. Well, thank you. And I think that idea of, liking a challenge resonates with our entire community. Pancreatic cancer is definitely not for the faint of heart, and it's a big challenge, but with people like you who are dedicated and committed and like a challenge, I have no doubt we are going to overcome this. So we're running a little bit short on time. I want to make sure we have time for Q&A with our attendees. So Ingunn and Nancy, that was a terrific discussion. Thank you so much. Again, Ingunn for your amazing research, and Nancy for your contributions and leadership to PanCAN. So thank you both.
You're welcome.
So to all of our attendees, again, thank you. Everything that you've heard today is because of you. PanCAN is excited, we're motivated, we're raring to go, and have lots of important work ahead of us. And really, I believe that PanCAN is uniquely positioned to really play an extremely critical and important role in accelerating progress. So as a reminder, again, you can submit questions through the Q&A. Again, click on the three dots and you can send some Q&A or some questions, and we'll try to get to them. Maybe while people are doing that, Dr. Lowy, I'll ask you, just from your opinion, we talked a lot about funding junior investigators. You've been a part of this field for a long time. Why is funding junior investigators such an important strategy for building the field and advancing the disease?
Well, we always talk about children are the future. Well, in research, young investigators are the future. They are really the people who are going to, comprise the field going forward. They often have the energy and boldness of new ideas. And so, we really have to have that foundation to support the field going forward. This is not a short-term fight. This is a long-term battle. We want to get that 5-year survival up from 10%, towards 50%, but we want to get it to 100%, eventually. And it's not going to happen in, unfortunately, 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. We need to have people who are committed to staying in this field for the long term, and we want the best and the brightest in pancreas cancer research.
Yep, great. There's still no questions have come in, so I'll ask another one. So Dr. Lowy, what are you most excited about? Like, what gets you excited when you get up every day about how we can, really accelerate progress?
Well, I mean, I think what's most exciting in the field, and I mentioned it when I talked about precision promise, is we've never had so many different uh, agents in development and that are based on the research foundation that we've been talking about all day. And the fact is, we understand pancreas cancer biology just light years more than we did, a decade ago. And obviously, we have huge gaps in knowledge still, but we understand a tremendous amount about this tumor, and that's led to, really the creation of numerous different domains of attack on the cancer. Whether you're focused on immunotherapy, like Ingunn is focused on. There is a whole field of metabolism, trying to target how the pancreas cancer cells get energy. We understand that pancreas cancer cells can be more susceptible to DNA damage, and there are ways to exploit those vulnerabilities. And I could go on, but this tells you that we have not one plan. We have a lot of different plans to try to tackle this, and it probably will take that to really be successful. So that's what excites me, that we aren't just sitting here with old chemotherapy drugs that we're just trying to recycle. These are new approaches. They're innovative, and they have very good scientific basis for pursuing them.
Yep, and it seems to me, just as someone been involved in the field and sort of watching it for the last 20 years, that the conversation definitely evolves every year. There are new things we're talking about, a new understanding of the disease, a new understanding of how we might treat patients. So it is evolving.
Yeah, and in large part due to PanCAN's efforts, the field, kind of the research base, has expanded so much. And I think you alluded to it in your slide about how many different institutions PanCAN has funded, how many different scientists. Years ago, there was to get everybody in one room who really was focused on pancreas cancer. And that is not the case anymore. It's really a field that has grown tremendously, but still remains incredibly cohesive, and which is really terrific and really helps us move even faster.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lowy, Nancy, Ingunn. It was a terrific discussion, and I so appreciate all of you and the important role that you all play in the field, and in particular in supporting PanCAN. So for all of our attendees, if there's more that you'd like to know about the impact that you're making, please feel free to reach out anytime to PanCAN staff, your PanCAN staff partner, or you can always contact Christine Dittmer, and her email address and phone number is on the screen. So as we conclude today's webinar, I want to again thank our amazing guest speakers. I hope you found the webinar informative and look forward to hearing your feedback. We will be sending a post-webinar survey today, and we would really ask all of the attendees to fill it out. We definitely look at those and use those to continue to improve these webinars for the future. We've also recorded the webinar, so if you'd like to listen to it again or pass it along to friends or family, you'll receive an email with a link to the recorded version within a week. So again, thank you everybody for your incredible support, for staying the course with us. We're so deeply grateful and determined to never stop working to accelerate progress for patients. Thank you everyone. Be safe and stay well.